Hey, Facebook friends, Marianne here. Wow, I need to take a day to just think about everything that I saw yesterday and think about how best to talk to you guys about it. Because I know the videos are very intense, the photographs are very intense, and I've had to make a lot of hard decisions today and figure out how best to talk to you about what's happening. And this video, as always, is both for people outside the United States and people here in the United States. I wanted to be as authentic as possible. That's why you're seeing me here with no makeup. I have seen some very hard things in my life. I have been responsible for cleaning up the blood, large amounts of blood after a murder. I have walked on bones in Rwanda. I have hidden from the guy who did a lot of the killing in Rwanda as he walked around with a machete and a skull on his head. I have been in places where corporations have been intentionally poisoning the water and seen people dying of what they thought was cancer, and it was actually uranium or arsenic poisoning. I have been chased by people with knives. I've had 3 kidnapping attempts on my life, and I have had 3 different stalkers. No, those were all different people. It wasn't like one of the stalkers was one of the kidnappers. I've seen some hard stuff. And yesterday, was one of the hardest things I've seen in my life. It was horrible.
Set the children free! 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 Set the children free!
Right now, there are children in cages being held on this bus. I've seen it myself. They're in cages, and we're trying to keep the bus from getting into the center.
Set the children free! Set the children free!
Marianne here. Anyone has any questions? I am seeing children in cages. This bus right here has tiny children in cages. There's the police. They're trying to get us out. I want you to see this.
Children!
All these children.
Free the children!
Free the children! Free the children!
Pray! Pray in the name of Jesus! Set the children free in the name of Jesus!
We didn't know we were going to see it. We thought we were taking the bus down to go protest outside where they're keeping people. For those of you who don't know, right now, people that they label as an illegal immigrant are being held in these places, but they are tearing families apart. They're sending the girls up to New York, keeping the boys here, supposedly. And they're currently building 3 $44 million each prisons here in Texas, which are supposed to eventually house illegal immigrants. I must say, on the more ironic, humorous side of things, I don't understand how the Republicans justify this, because the more I dug, I thought originally each of these prisons was going to be $44 million to build. But apparently, no, it's $44 million a year to keep it going. If I were a Republican putting financial stuff first, I would definitely be saying, no, we don't want to hold them. You kick them out. You don't want to hold them. Why do you want to hold them? Why do you want to keep people here? You don't want to hold them. Because that's a lot of money. That $44 million could go a lot of stuff. Republicans, there's your tax cut. Yeah. As someone who actually, cares a lot about people, I could see that money going to, so many other things. Our veterans, for one thing, giving them a better system so they're not living in tents, so that they get better help and health care. I could certainly see it going to communities like Flint that need to get their water fixed. I could see so many other things for that. 3 times 44 million a year, going. But that's just me. Now, putting all that aside, I'm looking at things the way my father taught me, which was, okay, Marianne, remove your emotion, and let's just see where the money goes. Who's winning in this scenario? So I'm going to just paint you some facts. That's 3 prisons, $44 million each, being built here in Texas. That's one fact. So here's another fact. Texas, it is legal here in Texas for private prisons to auction their prisoners off to corporations for free physical labor. So you can go on YouTube and you can see this. I got to see one and it was awful. A young man brought up to a stand. He said, "This young buck can give you so many hours, blah, 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 blah." And the guy who's speaking, he sounds like an auctioneer. How much going to use that? It's horrible. So the private prisons make a whole lot of money on this. So when I'm seeing illegal immigrants not being sent away, but being kept here, and I'm seeing private prisons being built with federal funds, same way that we build a football stadium, people want to understand how that works, but being built, I'm seeing potential huge amounts of free labor available for a highest bidder. Essentially, I am seeing, in my eyes, essentially legal slavery. Now, there's a friend of mine named Alan Howard. He is the chairman of the board for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And he won a case against Del Monte a number of years ago. And what he won the case for was Del Monte had a huge ranch that was located between Austin and Dallas. And they had been sitting people down to South America and say, hey, if you come up here, we work for us for a year. That basically works off the money that we will then use to get you a green card and set you up here legally in the United States. But you're responsible to get yourself up here. So they were sending recruiters to South America and to India. I don't know why India, but South America and India. And they were getting them to come here. When they got here, Tavante's people would meet them and say, here, we brought you, we'll take you to the place where you'll be working. And then the people thought they were allowed to send some money home as well. They were instead put in very small places, and about 40 people to one of these buildings with a big hole in the ground. The hole was the toilet for all 40 of them. So it got really smelly in there. Of course, no air conditioning, Texas heat. If they wanted to leave, they couldn't because the whole complex was surrounded by barbed wire and they had people with guns. Southern Poverty Law Center's case was about the fact that the people with Del Monte were making the argument that it was illegal to have slaves if the slaves were illegal immigrants, that there was nothing in the Constitution that prevented illegal immigrants from being slaves. It was not until that case was won by the Southern Poverty Law Center that it finally became illegal to have illegal immigrants as slaves. That's a huge freaking case. In many ways, that's the real true end of slavery, as far as it being legally allowed in this country. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is I want you to know that there are major corporations that go to these countries and encourage people, come to America, the land of milk and honey. We've got, we will set you up, give us X amount of time, we'll send some money home to your family, and in the process, you can get yourself ready to become a legal citizen. And of course, it's a joke because they have no power to do that. We currently, as a country, are doing nothing to dissuade people of this fact. So I'm hoping by my telling people this, you can share it out there. And I wish I could speak Spanish better because I would. But people need to know that this, if you have a recruiter going to your country and saying, I can get you a green card, work for me for a year, pay it off, That's bullshit. It does not work. It's not real. Our country right now is currently not doing anything to crack down on companies that are doing this. But that's a huge part of the problem. One of the big things that was going on as well doing that, and they have documents that you can see online, but doing that trial, there were executives said if you get women, you can have a little extra. Of course, that was alluding to sex trafficking. Unfortunately, here in Dallas, we are the largest importer of sex trafficked individuals. The biggest sales moment is during the Super Bowl. Every time the Super Bowl occurs, there are tons of parties around the city in which women mostly, but children as well, and boys, but mostly women, are being sold. So, that's, no one cracks down on the NFL. The second biggest place that happens is with the sports car racing. No one's cracked down on sports car racing. But those industries are very complicit in this because they allow it to happen all around them all the time. So anyway, I want you to really see how our country is involved in all this. The number one city for exporting is Phoenix, Arizona. So they really, really get them out. So anyway, so you can see where Texas is in all this. Other things that are coming out of our great state of Texas. We have Richard Spencer, who began the alt-right. They're the ones who like to do the Hail Hitler slogan and respect to Donald Trump. They're also the ones who created that tiki torch thing that went down, over in North Carolina. The ones that were chanting, "You will not replace us," and "Jews will not replace us," those guys. I want to also help people understand how intelligently all this has been pulled together, because a lot of people really are not respecting how intelligently this has been carried out. And while it's fun for a lot of people on the progressive side to try and say, "This is stupid, what an idiot," blah, blah. When you call a bigot stupid, you're not helping your side. They may believe in stupid things, but it doesn't mean they have a low IQ. Acknowledge that the other side does know what it's doing, is being strategic, and is highly intelligent. And that's just the first step you have to do in order to be able to progress further. But right now, Richard Spencer, who was a graduate of St. Mark's in 1997, that's one class behind me. I was 96 at Hockaday. They were brother and sister school. In order to go to Hockaday, and I think it's similar at St. Mark's, you have to pass 3 different IQ tests. It really does a doozy on your self-confidence, because everybody around me was a freaking genius, and I always felt stupid. But I'm not kidding. A friend of mine, April Davis, she was a child prodigy. She would be playing the violin, at all these big symphonies when she was a little kid. My friend Catherine Gillum, we went to Phantom of the Opera. She came back, played the entire musical score by memory backwards on the piano at my parents' home. My friend Elizabeth Einstein memorized Grey's Anatomy just for fun of it. These are the girls I went to school with. So yeah, it was easy to start feeling like you weren't the most brilliant person in the world when you're around people like that. So first of all, to go to either of these schools, you have to be smart. Well, Richard Spencer went from there on to Duke University, where he met Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller and he both very much believed in white supremacy. They idealized the old American Nazi Party, and the American Nazi Party liked to say America first. They like to say make America great again. Many of the slogans that were used in Trump's campaign came from the old American Nazi Party. This was done intentionally. I'm not saying it was done because Trump wanted to do it. I'm talking about the people that strategized to gain support for him. Trump probably actually in this case didn't know it. And the reason for that is because, he just, like a lot of politicians, people say, I handle this, I handle that. So he let them handle this. They were very aware of the memetics. Memetics are those things that we get stuck in our brain. Like, why is someone willing to buy Nikes at 3 times the cost of another tennis shoe? Because it's so in the mimetic of culture that that little swish means that it's worth that much more. So they go and they do it. Why does someone care if something's a Gucci handbag because it has the Gucci thing on it? That's because the meme has gotten stuck in your head. It probably didn't cost any more than something else manufactured the exact same way by this exact same materials with exact same quality and doesn't have the slogan, but you think it is worth more because it has that thing on it. That's a meme. Well, Richard Spencer was brilliant, and as someone who has a degree in organizational psychology, I'll try and sum this up as fast as I can. There was a little frog called Pepe, and it was a very popular among people that like to do gaming. Gaming is, where for those of you who are older, those are the people that get on the internet and play video games all day. You have gamers from all walks of life. But if you are looking to recruit people into a cult-like situation, you want people who are lonely. Often young men who are sexually frustrated and socially isolated are an ideal choice. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, in the gaming world is made up of lots of them. I'm not saying everybody who's in the gaming world is that way, but it's made up of lots of them. There's also a misogynistic overtone in the gaming world. If you talk to any women or girls who have been good in that world and achieved anything, they will tell you how misogynistic it is. A lot of guys really resent the women that succeed at gaming. So, not that I would know anything about that, except what I researched and learned. I was of the, I had the Nintendos and I played Galaga. That was my thing. But I can remember as a kid playing Galaga. I would go and score and I could do really well. And man, the boys and the men hated me for it. But magnify that to where it's real hate, not what I just joked about, real angry hate. So you have that kind of misogynistic culture, lonely and sexual frustration. That's already there. So Richard Spencer took one of the memes that was in this little frog figure, and started adding more to it and started building it up bigger and bigger and bigger. He found an ancient Egyptian god of mischief and started taking certain symbols from that and putting it into the Pepe the Frog and mixed it together and slowly made it just something that people who like to game related to. And then he started having Pepe say things that were slightly racist, slightly misogynistic, slightly, all these things, a little more. He started doing this with an age group that was about 12. So by the time they were around 18 to 21, in that range, they'd been inundated and they really loved Pepe, and he helped them feel like a community. This has been a long time planning. That got continued and continued. And eventually, after there were enough people, he just said, let's bring everybody together. We'll be one big family. Let's corral everyone together in one big meeting. And remember, when people see that you're proud of yourselves, you will be told you're the one demographic who's told that you're not allowed to be. So stand tall, stand for what you are. No one will replace you in this world. We will stand with you. So it was brilliant. It was brilliant, because he got all of these lonely people who had hooked into that gaming world as their only sense of family, and immediately came to the calling. And there were drums and the tiki torches, and it was like boom, 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 boom. You got all these young testosterone and the bam, 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 drums going, and they're going to start marching, and they're going to start repeating whatever the main hollower is shouting. And let me tell you, in organizational psychology 101, this is just like getting people to faint. They could have said, "We love broccoli," and they would say, "We love broccoli." I mean, this is just like a thing, when you get that many people riled up and chanting, whatever. So, this was a very planned thing over years of people that really knew what they were doing psychologically. Meanwhile, there's a professor out at Stanford University that had developed a way to map and identify memetics and a way to map the way different demographics were going to react to different stimuli. This is not nearly as advanced as what Don Edward Beck does with his spiral dynamics and how that is being incorporated, with computers. Not nearly as specific, but it was still light years ahead of what the general public was doing. And to my knowledge, light years ahead of what any progressive leader is doing. So they took that, and largely that came because of, I can't think of his name, the guy that worked over at Breitbart. Anyway, I can't think of his name. Another big alt-right leader, another white supremacist. So between all this, and it was Stephen Miller who linked him in. So you have Stephen Miller, you have Richard Spencer, and that guy at Breitbart, and they become from the leadership to help get Trump elected. And if you know anything about white supremacists, one of the main things that they know is their history. They are very proud about certain dates, very, very proud that certain things are happening historically on a certain date, and remembering certain things, remembering when things were out. So, for example, when the whole thing about DACA was being rescinded, that was done on the anniversary of a day when a number of Hispanics were kicked out of the country. These things were never haphazard. So anyway, nor was America First and Make America Great Again. These slogans being from the American Nazi Party that existed in the 20s and 30s and early 40s, they were created because they knew that the followers of those movements knew those things. And it was a mimetic. They'd be like, we're getting called out back there again. And the format, if you Google and you see the way a lot of Trump's things were done, you will see the format was done along, to fit those old mimetics. So a lot of people never recognized this or knew it unless you knew things historically and had done your research. So one of the main things in that time that Stephen Miller put together was, I guess you could call it a manifesto, but it was what he would like to see happen. They would like to see the majority of America be white. In order to try and help make this happen, they needed to decrease the amount of basically brown-skinned immigrants coming into the country. So cracking down on the southern border. Notice we're not doing anything on the northern border. Cracking down on the southern border. We really have a whole lot of different ways to attack that. And the way he would do it, he said, yeah, you can talk about a wall and everything, but he wanted to try and hold people there, break families apart, instill fear. Meanwhile, you have a lot of people that, in my opinion, are not racist at all, but they're just economic opportunists and operating from a sociopathic point of view. And that's what I would say Trump is. I don't actually believe he's racist at all. I think he's just a sociopath that is in whatever's going to help himself the most. And therefore, he's going to take full advantage of other people's hate. It doesn't bother him that they have it. I mean, you've heard him say about Biden, if we're up to Biden, referring to LGBT people, he'd kill them all. You don't ever want him in charge. He'll have them all killed. That's, Trump's way of joking about the fact that he's very aware that his vice president has that much disdain for LGBT people. That does not bother him at all. It's just as long as he can use Biden for the way he needs him, he doesn't care that Biden feels that way. So that's the way he would look at, at any of the other people like Stephen Miller. So if Stephen Miller has a project which is about trying to create these internment camps and trying to put, starting with the illegal immigrants, and during this time, writing language, which Trump has used, calling illegal immigrants animals, calling the countries in Africa and in Latin America shithole countries, calling or referring most recently to people from Latin America as an infestation. So apparently I'm part of an infestation. Beware. Beware. Anyway, you have to find humor in this or you go mad. And it's hard explaining finding humor in a dark time. But But anyway, so you have people, that are taking advantage of the situation. But from both ends, on one hand, you have people that have very much decided they want to take advantage of everything because they want to, get rid of the growing number of brown-skinned people in the country. I don't even know if they feel that way all because they don't like brown skin, or if some of them feel that way in part because, they may actually be thinking, I would like to, I would like to not, to make some money on this. So let's see, how do I make money off of his hate? So in those cases, then you end up saying, well, how do we turn this into a workforce? And that's when you start looking at the 3 camps that are being built down here at $44 million each here in Texas, where it is legal to auction off prisoners as free labor because the private prisons make the money, the prisoners don't make the money. And that's where a lot of the private prisons get a great deal of money, is by auctioning off their prisoners as a free labor force to corporations. So, if you wanted to try and make a lot of logical sense, and you didn't want to lose a lot of money, well, the first thing you do is you kick out illegal immigrants out of the country. Instead, we have a situation where they're obviously planning on keeping them here for a while. Most recently, I don't know if you all noticed in the minutia of what Trump did when he said, okay, fine, we'll keep the families together. But in that report, it now says that they can keep the whole families of illegal immigrants here indefinitely. Why do you want to keep anyone indefinitely when it costs so much? Right now there are prisons where it costs more to keep a prisoner than to give them a college education. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? So, who is going to actually win here financially? Well, if you have 3 prisons that are being built to keep illegal immigrants here indefinitely, and they're being built in Texas, then I can tell you as a Texan that here is where they can be auctioned off for free labor. You have a free labor force. You have essentially slavery, legalized slavery. So that's one thing. That is one thing that we need to make sure does not happen. Otherwise, you don't put any citations of any sort on the corporations that are urging people to come here. You just collect people at the border and throw them into the prison camp. That's going to be a free labor force. And for all the people that don't want the illegal immigrants here because they say they're stealing your jobs, and you're talking about blue-collar jobs, assembly line jobs, those kind of jobs, well, there's no way. If you can't compete with someone willing to work for a lower salary, there's no way you're going to be competing with somebody working for slave wages. In other words, nothing. You won't be able to compete with that at all. So if you're just forgetting the humanitarian side of it economically, this isn't good news for you. If you're a true old school conservative Republican, this isn't good news for you at all. So, set that aside. I think you have 2 different issues here. You have some people who are going, ooh, great opportunity to get a slave labor force. I really do think that's where it's headed. And then the other side of it, you have people saying, I don't like those kinds of brown people. Let's get rid of them. Now, neither of those are the everyday American who sits in the middle of they're not far right, they're not far left, and they don't want anyone to be split apart, and they don't want illegal immigrants taking their jobs, and they really aren't full of hate, and they're just looking at this whole thing going, my whole country's gone mad. I know a lot of you fall into that out there, that demographic, and that's why I'm trying to break it down. So that's another thing. Now, in the middle of all this, some of the things that Richard Spencer and Stephen Miller rolled out, and which Trump has acted on. One of the big ones is people like me who are naturalized. While everybody has rightfully been looking at the idea of of these tender age camps, which are people who are 10 or younger, we're all heartbroken over that, and looking at the fact that some cases they're babies who are put in these camps, and we're all deeply disturbed by it. And so our whole gaze is looking at things like a fake basketball pass, dribble, toss over here, fake over here, and then really throw over there. Among the things that have been thrown over there, aside from drilling in the Arctic and all sorts of other things that most of us would be horrified about, what he did with naturalization. When Obama was in office, he opened the door just a little bit on naturalization. It used to be if you were naturalized, you were a citizen just as much as someone born on this land. No one could revoke your citizenship. You are naturalized, therefore you are a citizen. End of discussion. Unfortunately, Obama's administration, they thought it was fit to be able to open the door a little bit, because they said that there were people here that had been, they were endangering America, people that, were terrorists and had faked naturalization papers, and they needed to be able to get in there. So what they did is they opened it up a little bit, which required the FBI, CIA, whichever entity it was that was accusing, to provide tons and tons and tons of proof, much more than normal that you would think for like a regular case, but it had to really be loaded. And if that was done, then the person could be called in, and then a lot more work had to be done. And if that was proven, then this, kind of trial thing went on. That was done, then the naturalization could be taken from that person. But it was intentionally bogged down with all that criteria, so it could never be misused. So about 3 days ago, while everybody is looking at, these internment camps around our country, Trump undid that so that it does not require all that minutia. Now they can just take away the naturalization of anyone. They just can. Now what they're doing is that they are going through and checking up on fingerprints. And if fingerprints seem wrong in any way, and like this is what happened earlier this year, and to one young man who was adopted from South Korea, he was adopted when he was, I think, 5 days old, similar story to mine, into a wealthy white family, I believe up in Seattle, that area. He was brought in by that family, raised, had nothing in common with South Korea other than his DNA, became a doctor, I think a pediatrician, home with family, good citizen, always paid his taxes, everything right, but they found there was something off with his fingerprints when he was a little kid, and that was enough that they took away his naturalization and tossed him over to South Korea, where he didn't speak the language, didn't have any money, and had no way back home. So he killed himself. He hung himself. That happened earlier this year. Now, they're looking at doing it en masse, looking at all of us who have been naturalized, even if we were little, and making sure our fingerprints are correct. And if there's a smudge, if something's off, if whatever, they can now legally use that to kick you out of the country. So all this is happening in a very fast pace. And I can guarantee you they're probably going to be looking at those that look like me, people who are brown. All this is from the brainchild of Stephen Miller. And that's, so while we look at Sessions and we look at Trump, it's very important that we look at who's actually doing the minutia of writing these documents up and where it's leading. In the meantime, that we have those three $44 million a piece camps that are prisons, that are being built just for illegal immigrants here in Texas. Now they're talking about I think it was the Navy that's been tasked with creating what they're calling austere camps. The austere camps are the ones that will be intense, and they will be holding people there too. This is very frightening to me. I don't know where our country is going with this. I know that I grew up in a time where, I didn't have to carry papers around in my purse. That if someone wanted proof that I was a citizen, my driver's license was enough. Now, as a brown-skinned person, it's not. Thanks to SB 4 here in Texas, I have to show documents to show my naturalization. So what you're seeing are some the immigration inspection, going down the aisle and making sure that we all have our proper documents. Try not to take it personally that he's only asking those that kind of look like me. Almost there. I better turn this thing off. In question by this new thing that Trump has passed as they go through everybody who's been naturalized. And of course, I was thinking about that yesterday when I was, protesting in front of the bus. We sat down in front of the bus in order to keep it from moving so that the media could get pictures and finally prove that these children were in cages.
We are America! We are America! We are America! We are America!
Again, you have to see these kids. These kids are in cages in this bus. They're in cages. Anyone who asks, are they in cages? Yes, these kids are in cages. You can see them in the bus. These little innocent children are in cages. They are in cages. I don't want to hear any more crap about saying they're not in cages, because I am seeing it for myself. They're in cages. How can you do this? What if it's your family?
For those that don't want to call it a cage, then let me say it was bars that were holding them. Let's put you in a 4x4 thing that has bars on all sides and see if you think it's a cage or something else. Maybe you have a euphemism for it, but I imagine it will feel to you like it's a cage. And we wanted the world to finally see this, and we wanted our country to finally see it. Because I know a lot of people that I think are decent people that have been telling me, Marianne, that's all bullshit. There's no cages. And I wanted you to see. And that's why I went. And if I was wrong, I'd be sitting here telling you I was wrong, that there weren't any. But there were. And we saw them. And the bus was full of children. Little hands about this big coming up, going underneath the bars to touch the window, waving at us, big eyes, just, and heartbreaking. One of the hardest things I've ever seen in my life. Any of us expected to see, and that is children in cages on a bus. Everything, all the debates people have been saying, at least in my mind, it's settled because I saw it. They're in cages. So, what do you all?
They have their hands on the windows.
It's just like I can catch that. That's what impressed me the most. What hurt me the most. The silhouette of a 4 or 5 year old child. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl because the windows in the bus are very, very dark. However, you could see, if you got close enough, silhouettes of children, and you could see the silhouettes of the bars inside. And you can, a lot of people put their hands up against the window, and the little children were touching our hands through the glass. What the yelling can you do? What the yelling of the crowd? We're with you. We love you. This is going to get better. An amazing outpouring. I hope those children heard it.
I hope so. I mean, you just had to look at their faces to see they don't know what's going on. They don't know where they're headed. They're in a strange country. And it's looked from their expressions like we were probably some of the first kind of happy to see you faces that they've seen in a long time.
Yes,
Showing love.
Showing love.
As much as we could.
Yeah. So, I can't emphasize how important it is for people to really don't listen to statistics. Think of them as human beings, like just children. Your niece, your nephew, your grandchildren, your children, someone you just try and understand that that's the same age of these kids. We saw hands that were about this big, just pressed against that window. And, it's amazing to me that our country is doing this.
Have to find a solution, a good one. Bring the kids back with their families.
We're better than this.
If you can see, we're all drenched in sweat. So is everyone on this bus. It is hot out here. It's like 105 degrees. And we get to get into an air-conditioned bus and go on to where we go next. Those children, it did not look air-conditioned, I'm just going to say. It looked like a prison transport bus. And from everything that I was hearing from the people who have, there are 4 spiritual leaders that were able to go in there today. It's not air conditioned in there. So really, we're getting into the air conditioning now. I mean, and we were all about to die. There was one grown man that got faint and almost fainted over. So, you know, that's what we just saw, just for a short period of time. And that's what those little kids are about to go to for however long they're there.
So please, on Facebook, don't have an answer. You don't have a clue. Not a clue what's taking place.
Have a heart.
Please.
Have a heart.
I'm scared because I worry that our country's government is wanting to see how far we'll let them go. I was up at Standing Rock, and at Standing Rock, they had a rule that women cannot go around by themselves. And the reason was because the people would come on snowmobiles, grab the woman, take them, put her in a cage, a chicken coop cage, strip her, hose her down and leave her out there in the freezing cold. And they're still trying to get some of the people who were taken that way. So they were, and the people that rode these snowmobiles and would come and grab the women, they were either private security, or a lot of it was Blackwater. The other thing that they were, they worked for was a lot of private police, on the off duty. And they were also police barred from other governments, other states. So, that's how that happened. And, Amnesty International talked about it, gathered proof about it. The United Nations gathered proof about it. The UN said it was awful and should stop. And our government didn't intervene. And private companies, Energy Transfer Partners, Mr. Warren, who ran it, they were able to continue with their own private militia and continue this work to this day. So, Mr. Warren, another person from Dallas. I don't know why Dallas is getting all these crazies. I really don't know. But anyway, so, all that went on and our country was fine with it. So we seem to be fine with people in cages, citizens in cages, despite the fact that we had people like Wesley Clark who brought tons of veterans there who witnessed it and said, we can't believe they're doing this. This is what they get us to do in other countries, and not to our own citizens. So I invite you to contact a veteran who is there, hear it from them. Don't take my word for it. But when people were okay with that, now they're saying, okay, people are okay with people in cages. Our own citizens. Let's see if they'll be okay with children in cages. Let's see if they'll be okay with separating families. Let's see if they'll be okay when we announce we're doing an austere camp. Let's see if they'll be okay if we build huge prisons to hold these illegal immigrants here, even though it's going to cost us more money than just kicking them out of the country. Let's see if they'll, if they've already seen that we're okay with auctioning prisoners off to do free labor. So, I think that our country is constantly testing the American people to say, will their ethics allow us to get away with this? Okay, will they let a little more? Okay, a little more. Okay, a little more. Okay. And if all of us remain quiet and we don't communicate to our government that we are not okay with this, that we are not okay with families being torn apart, that we are not okay with children in cages, that we are not okay with verbiage that says that these families, that once we unify, they can be kept here indefinitely. And let's pay attention also about the children, because, this happened yesterday. Trump announced that he wants to undo the limitations on child labor laws. My dad used to say that one of the best things that happened in our country ever that helped us to get closer to being civilized was finally getting rid of child labor. Basically, little 4-year-olds being put in mines. That kind of thing. Things that would put children at risk for their lives, their health, their well-being, were no longer things that were allowed for children to do for a job, for money. And, this was basically a huge step for our nation because we were able to step away from the abuse of children for profit as a nation as a whole. Now, of course, that continued by individual people who are abusers, but as a nation, it became something that we didn't allow in general practice. So now that we have all of these children in these tender age camps and these tiny little kids who knows where all of them are. They seem to be snuck around our country in different places. And I do use the word snuck on purpose, because if you see like the mayor up in New York, they weren't even told they were getting like 235 children. It was caught on video. That's how any of this is done. So now Trump is saying he wants to remove the age cap for child workers. This is something all Americans should be paying attention to. Because I'm just sitting here looking at, okay, the one state where it's legal to auction prisoners off for free labor is getting 3 $44 million camps. No one's going to do something unless it's making them money. So, at 44, not just to build, but it's going to cost 44 a year for each of those. That means that in business, it would need to make at least 88 to make any kind of sense. Where's that going to come from? Probably through free labor, probably through legalized slave labor. And now we're looking at these tender age camps. Now we're looking at austere camps. America, we need to pay attention to what's happening in our country. And now they're looking at, trying to denaturalize as many citizens as possible based on these fingerprint things. I hope to God when I was a little child and they took my fingerprints that I didn't smudge them. Or one day I may be giving you these videos from over the border. At least, yo conozco poquito español, which is a little bit more than a lot of the other people who are in my same situation. But, as we move forward, I don't want to just give you the bad. I want to give you the good. I know some friends who believe that they can create an AI program to help reunify the parents. As of right now, our nation, to my knowledge, does not have any entity that is responsible for unifying the family. So while the president said that we will no longer be taking families apart, there is nothing is being said about reunification. There have been only a few handfuls that I've heard. Right now, the ACLU has 2 cases going in which 2 women are suing so that they can remain in the United States until their children are found. Their children have been lost for about 8 months. So, this is the reality. I am in touch with people up in New York, because I sit on the board of the Interfaith Center of New York, and Reverend Chloe Breyer, who is the executive director up there. She is the daughter of Supreme Court Justice Breyer, so she's a very informed person, an activist in her own right up there. I'm very informed by people down here of what they're doing down here. But I want to give you a larger context. Right now, we're looking at history replayed. There are many of us that look at our history and we say, God, if I was there during the times that slavery was legal, I would be an abolitionist. I'd be standing, or women's rights, I'd be standing. We say, oh, if I were there during Japanese internment camps, I would be standing up for those people. We like to think that we would be those in the wing of Martin Luther King, that we would be those operating the Underground Railroad, that we would be those who fought against the Red Scare. We would like to think that we were those who risked life and limb, who raised our voices in the moments that it was scariest. But you don't know until you're there. You really don't know until you're there. And well, America, we're there. We cannot sit on the side when little children are in cages. We cannot sit on the side when whole groups of people are described as an infestation. We cannot sit on the side when we have people that are being talked about as if they were animals. We cannot sit on the side when our president used these very words for them. We cannot sit on the side when you have people who romanticize the Nazi Party and people that romanticize the American Nazi Party as if it were a wonderful age and time, and who are intentionally using those ancient, I call them ancient because they are so outdated, memetics, to try and rally up a new group of people that they can convince are meant for more things. We cannot sit, more things than what every day everyone else should be owed, that we are all owed the decency of being equal to each other, the decency of being recognized as equal to each other. The fact that I have money does not make me better than you. The fact that you have lighter skin does not make you better than me. The fact that you are a Christian and I am not does not make you better than me. The fact that, I happen to speak 2 languages decently well does not make me better or less than the person who speaks 5, 6, or 1, or the child who will never be able to speak language. America, we have to take a look at our role in things. The fact that I was invited into a meeting with the Brazilian consulate to the UN, in which our country was on the other side arguing that third world countries should not have access to first world technology. Why? Why are we in that position? Who are we to say that to another country? I get if it was weaponry, but when we're talking about medicine, we're talking about technology to do better engineering, manufacturing, how can we deny people the opportunity to better themselves and then, move past them super fast and then ignore how our addictions in this country to drugs fuels what happens in their country as their underground sells to our country? How can we ignore all that? Until the day we end up putting mass advertisements out in which we have vivid images of the bodies that get killed from these cartels, and we say, if you buy an illegal joint, you are part of the cause of death of these innocents. Until the day we're willing to make it that, buy an illegal joint, you got blood on your hands, until we make it that clear, we're complicit. If we don't want to make pot illegal, well then, if we don't want to make that statement there, then we need to make pot illegal, because that way the tax money from there can come into our country and we can hurt a lot of these cartels where it hurts. You want to try and crack down on the cartels that are also into the sex trafficking? Make marijuana legal. I hate the smell. I think it smells like someone peed somewhere. Smells like a skunk. It makes me nauseous. I can't get away from the people who are doing that fast enough. I can't stand it when they're high. I find them obnoxious. So believe me, it's not like I want to light up, and I don't enjoy people who are doing it around me at all. At all. I disdain it. I despise it even. It's destroyed lives of people I know. But if we allow our citizens to keep buying it, we're giving money to the cartels who are also operating the sex trafficking rings. You want to get rid of the sex trafficking rings? Then we also need to start doing raids during the NFL Super Bowl, when it's the largest #1 sales time of the year. Then we need to start paying attention whenever the NFL is having big celebrations, because that's when people are being sold. Then we need to start paying attention to whenever the car races are going on, because that's when people are being sold. We need to start hitting on the people that are actually buying them. Hello, we're the largest importer here in Dallas. We need to pay attention to that. So, if we take a look at all this, we need to see how our country as a whole has been complicit in how things are. If we want people to not need to come here, then we need to invest by manufacturing jobs in their country, where we don't go by the lowest common denominator, but instead we go by what equals a decent minimum wage for that country. That's what we need to do. And that needs to be calculated by the reality of what it costs to be there. Not by, this is what people are generally willing to pay. Only by that will we be able to make a difference. Instead, our industries are going over there and trying to get people to come here illegally where they can use them as slaves. As long as we allow corporations to get away with that, we're still complicit. And I can hear you right now. You're saying, I'm not going over there trying to get someone to illegally come over the border to work for me. I'm not the one who's lighting up a joint. But when I say America, it's all of us, because we all vote on these issues. And all these issues are connected. And yes, race plays a large part of it too. But people are tapping into that for other reasons. When someone comes to you and says, you can't get that job because all these brown people are here, it's not really real, because right now, most likely you can't get that job because it has been sent overseas somewhere. That's what happened. And, and as I've said, I'm an independent. I'm not someone who's one side or the other. And one of the biggest things that I have, and I liked Clinton for a lot of reasons, but one of the worst things Bill Clinton ever did is he gave favored nation status to China. The minute he did that, it became cheaper to manufacture things in China than in our own country. It hurt our country. One of the smartest things that has ever been brought to the table was by President Bush Jr. And I was not a big fan of him at all. And yet, he came up with the idea of a worker permit program because he came out of Texas and he saw that down here, any restaurant you go to, any construction site you go to, any dirty job, any back-breaking job in the heat that used to be done by slaves, it's now being done most likely by the illegal immigrants because American citizens don't want to sweat that hard. They don't want to be in the hot sun that much. They don't want to hurt their hands that much. Right now up in Oregon, there's a city where people have shucked oysters and they can't do it anymore. Whole towns are closing because ICE is raiding them of their people. They don't have people because the people aren't legal or proper documentation, blah, 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 blah. So whole industries are being killed. People that produce berries, people that produce avocados, people that fished, people that got the oysters, all that stuff. So it's going to become more expensive to everybody. So you go in the store and you think, God, why are my cherries this much? Well, now you know why. Bush was the first president I know of who was willing to legally say, let's take a look at it legally. How is it that we can make a legal way to allow the industries that rely on this workforce to come in, work, and go back? And they're not American citizens. We still get some tax money out of it, and we're able to shift them away from those who are the illegal people coming in, doing the sex trafficking and the drug sales. These are just a few things. And how we got there from here, how we got here from there, from our past, is through a lot of things. Giving China favored nation status, not allowing the war on drugs to take a look at how we were creating the demand for that war, for the drugs. Not coming down on the NFL and the car racers and all the other groups that have allowed sex trafficking to occur all around their sports. All these things are things that we have been a part of. And as a nation, unless we're willing to look at it, we're going to continue to have people come over here. And now, unless we're willing to stand up and say no, we're going to have legal slavery with these 3 prisons, because I guarantee you they're going to auction these prisoners off for slave labor, free labor. And it's going to be called something different. They'll make it legal because it is legal here. They'll call it something else because the corporations will pay the prisons. But the prisoners will never see any of that cash. In an ideal world, I would say the prison should get some of it. The prisoner should get some of it, not now. It should be an account that they get when they have to go start their new life. Or it could go to their victims, or it could go to their families. But there are a lot of other ways that this could be handled. If you have to keep them here, that would be much more moral. If you're a true Republican and conservative about it, you would just want to say, hell no, we're not going to spend 3 times $44 million a year. We're going to just send everybody out of the country and we're not going to keep them here. That would be how we'd handle it. There would be no austere camps, no tender age camps. We wouldn't want the children and the babies, and we certainly wouldn't be thinking of ways to make the camp more austere. But we are. And we certainly wouldn't be going through our citizens who are naturalized, trying to see who among them we could denaturalize and therefore put into the camps. Yesterday, when I put my body in front of the bus with many, many other people, we did it because we wanted the media to finally capture photos of the children behind bars. We wanted them to see what we saw, so there would be no more debating, oh, they're not really behind bars, they're not really in cages. We wanted the public to see what we witnessed. I've had some people point out that we should get rid of all the photos because you put the children at risk because of sex trafficking and cartels and that might want to go and kill this 3-year-old kid. And I had to think a lot about that. And I said, I'm not going to get rid of it. First of all, there's only one photo that I took, and it's actually very milky and more artsy than anything. You just see the hand and the reflection of the American flag. The other photos were taken by other people, professional photographers, and it's already out there. But one of the big reasons I didn't want to take it is I wanted an answer to everybody that says children are not behind bars, children are not in cages, the innocents are not being imprisoned. I need our country to see the reality of what is happening here. Because unless we're willing to admit to the truth of what's happening, we cannot stop it from getting worse. I pray to God that I will never be saying this recording from the other side of the border because I've been removed of my legal status. I pray to God that I'm not going to get a knock on the door one day because ICE comes into my home because somehow my fingerprints that were taken when I was a kid got messed up and therefore I'm no longer naturalized. I pray to God that those are nightmares which are visiting other people's lives right now, even as we speak. I pray to God those things do not visit my life. But as somebody who this new reality has touched very deeply and personally, and who just witnessed those children on the bus, and who comes from a corporate family, so who's been taught follow the money to see where things are headed, I am worried. I am worried because right now in our city we have Pastor Jeffress, who has a lot of people that follow him and think the world of him. And one of the first things he did is he got on, just like after Trump said that Africa and Latin America are shithole countries, he put out a press release, Reverend Jeffress did, that, absolutely right. He's right. So we shouldn't be surprised that, with everything that's going on, Pastor Jeffress immediately came out and talked about why these camps are a good thing, these children behind bars are a good thing, that Trump is doing the work of God. And so many people are buying that. So many people are buying that horrible interpretation of the Bible. This is the same man that has said that Roman Catholics are of the devil. This is the same man that said you should not allow, you're supposed to basically stone a witch. So, he was throwing rocks at soldiers over at Fort Hood who are Wiccan, and God's congregation to do it, and do the same at metaphysical bookstores, one which closed because so many rocks were thrown through its windows here in Dallas. This is the same man that did that kind of stuff. And now, he's been anti-Muslim, anti-all sorts of things. And now this horrible man is encouraging his congregation, which is a huge congregation. The church takes up a whole block. Here in Dallas, we have a place where Ted Cruz was crowned. If you ever come in from DFW, you'll see what's a replica of the White House. And you can go online and see the video yourself. Evangelicals literally put a golden crown on Ted Cruz's head and believe that he's supposed to rule the world during the second coming of Christ. I'm not making this stuff up. Of course, we're the home of Richard Spencer. We're the home also of Mr. Warren, who has Energy Transfer Partners, of which, of course, Trump is on the board of. Energy Transfer Partners are the ones who were doing all that awful stuff at Standing Rock. Unfortunately, and I could keep on going, we have a lot of the major players here in our city. But we have a lot of people who are also major players who are what I would say on the right side of history, who do not want children kept behind bars. We have people on both sides of the aisle, both Republican and Democrat, and we have independents that are saying this is not right and this is not where they want our country to be headed. And it's to you that give me hope. I want to thank you for all the work that each of you are doing. I know there are some of you that don't agree with some of the things that I do, such as keeping the photos of the children up there. And again, I made that decision because the only photo I took did not show the child's face, and the rest of the photos were from other people, and they have already gone around the world. So at this point, I think it's most important that the risk that those of us who sat in front of the bus so that it had to be pulled to a stop and the photos could be taken to prove to the world what's happening in our country, I think that that's the best way to honor those children. Right now, I have friends who work with AI and who believe they can create a system to help unify these families, which Trump has said can now legally be reunified. So if you are someone that works with the people up in New York, or the people in Michigan, or the people here in Texas, please do contact me. We want to try and link all of these families together. Separately, I know that there's been a call out for indigenous languages. Many of these people do not speak Spanish. They speak Quechua, which is the Incan language. They speak one of the 32 dialects of the Mayan language. They speak Zapoteca. They speak all sorts of languages. Quechua, I can't pronounce it. Anyway, that is the language of the Inca. I could go on down the list, but many of these people speak Native American languages from their countries. They do not speak Spanish. So I know they're looking for translators, and you do not have to live in the United States. They're looking for translators who are also willing to Skype it. So if you're someone that can speak very fluidly an indigenous language from the Americas, then please do reach out to me. So anyway, those are some of the things that are going on. I want to make a very special acknowledgement to Isabell Rossignol and to Peter Johnson, who have been doing this remarkable work since the 1960s, where they fought against segregation in Louisiana and risked their lives. It was an honor, a true honor, to get to be on a bus with two people who have already given our nation so much. It was an honor to be with so many people, the rabbis, the imams, just the everyday people, the ministers, the priests that were on this trip with us. It was an interfaith trip. And it was the America that I know, the America that thrills me and inspires me. The America is made of people of many different creeds, many, many different political beliefs, many, many different walks of life. We saw people there that had every kind of financial demographic. We saw people there of every sexual orientation. We saw every gender there, every race there. I saw a Japanese person crying and saying, I promised my mom and dad that I would never let this happen in my life because it happened to them. I saw I've heard Max, who's a Holocaust survivor. He wrote a wonderful article. If you haven't seen it, Dallas Morning News published it. And he said, this is what happened to me. This is how it began in Germany. Don't let it begin here. And most importantly to me, I've seen a lot of Native Americans who are there saying, these are our brothers and our sisters. I'm Apache, I'm Cherokee. And that person over the border, they're Apache. That person over the border, they're Inca. That person over the border, they're Maya. They're Zapoteca. They are my brothers and sisters. But most importantly to me, what's most important to me are all of my friends who this current reality is not directly affecting. Those of you who are not at risk because you're not naturalized. You are blessed to be born on this land. Those of you who are not asked for your papers on a somewhat regular basis because you're white or you don't have an accent. Those of you who are wealthy and have a certain amount of buffering between what happens to others. I'm aware that because I have money, I get to be in a place that is not a neighborhood where ICE goes every night and randomly blasts down the door just to see if there's an illegal in there. That's a privilege. And I only had that privilege because my father made money. But I'm also aware that my grandfather and my grandmother, Josie Thompson and Margaret Thompson, I'm aware that they risked their lives and the lives of their children to stand up against the Ku Klux Klan, despite having their lives threatened again and again. And I'm aware when my dad stood for the Gay Pride March out at Fair Park, because I was the person getting the voicemails off the machine, and people would say, John Thompson, you're going to hell in the name of Jesus Christ, you fucking asshole, blah, blah, blah. You know, we're going to kill you, you blah, blah, blah. You know, and my parents let me take those voicemails down because they wanted me to hear what it is to stand up to something. So that one day when I needed to stand up for something, I knew what it would mean. So, yeah, there's a part of me yesterday that when I sat in front of the bus and I had someone lean over to me and say, Marianne, you know, when this bus starts moving, you could be run over. there's no guarantee. And the bus started kind of doing this, and I was scared at first. I was like, I'm not moving. And finally, one guy just leaned over and said, you better move now. And we got out of there. But I moved over, and I was looking. I wanted to see that child again. That little boy put his hand up at the window. And every part of me wanted to take a hammer and just open the window and let that boy out. Just to hold him and say, you're okay. You're not hated. You're a person. You're not an infestation. You're a person. Because I know what it's like. To be told that you're brown because you never bathe. I know what it's like to be told all sorts of things because of your skin color. I know right now going to, events where people have done the finger gun at me, go pew, 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 and hold the local police ICE officer who's at the event. Get her, get her. I know what that's like right now. And I know what it's like when the officer wearing ICE, his eyes look at mine, and he can't say anything, but because he's black, he knows how I feel. And he finds it ironic that he has to be the one wearing ICE. And he mouths, I'm sorry. I feel for those officers, those military men and women and police, that when I looked them in the face and I said, how can you do this? How can you stand there and put these children in cages? How can you live with yourself? How do you look at yourself at night? And none of them could look me in the eye. Instead, all they did is start crying and looked at the ground. Every single one of them looked at the ground, except for one. And he came up this close to my face, stared at me this close, took out the camera and took a photograph, and then put another photo, and then he held it, and then he said, well, I guess you're not going to say anything. I know in that moment I thought to myself, is he going to turn me in? Is ICE going to use this photo to look me up and then prioritize checking out my fingerprints? Am I going to be taken out of a business meeting at my office or from my home or at dinner by ICE officers who are going to say your fingerprints didn't match up perfectly when you were a kid and therefore your naturalization is no longer good? Am I going to be sent to a camp? Or I'm going to be lucky to be sent back to Mexico where, thank God, I actually can speak some of the language and I know people? And then I looked up and I saw those little faces. And I thought, it's worth it. And I went back and stood in front of the bus again until people forced us to go. But that's what's happening in my country. And it's very surreal to come back and be back in my privileged environment where, as of right now, I want caviar. I want to go to Paris. I want to buy some nice shoes. I can. But not everybody can do that. I went and talked to my mom. I called her on the phone tonight. I got to hear her voice. Not everyone can do that. I'm scared. I'm very scared. I'm very, very scared. What would happen to my mom if I got deported? How will my trust work it out legally, but still give the money to the Mimsy Institute, my husband, to keep things going? who will make the argument for my funds every year if I was put somewhere. When I get access to the medicine, the hemp oil that I need every day to keep from being like this 24/7. These are things that are real. And what's happening to those little children tonight? I had one friend tell me she's working with the children directly. I won't say who she is, but she said, Marianne, parents are disappearing. We don't know what's happening to the parents. They say they're going to reunify them, but they're disappearing. You can't find them. So I'm sharing all this because this is a reality that is happening here in Texas, in the USA. And it's one that affects a whole lot of people. And if you aren't brown-skinned, legal or illegal, please keep in mind that while you may not be Latino, Native American, from India, Middle East, Polynesian, Asian, while you may not be someone with the right hue, light-skinned African American, to be stopped and asked for papers, that our nation works on precedents. So if you hate somebody and you're happy, like for example, look at the cake thing that happened. The Supreme Court ruled that the cake store could say they don't have to give someone a cake if it's against the religion. So they don't need to serve the LGBT community. But then they came back. Then other people around the nation have already started cases in which they say, well, my religion says I can't interact or I don't interact with people that are black. They've actually had this. We have 3 cases in our nation right now. And they have to legally consider it because based on what the Supreme Court just said, is this the same thing? That's how our country works. You have a legal precedent that is set. It allows it to apply to everybody else. So if you're someone in Indiana that loved what Vice President Pence passed, which was saying you don't have to serve LGBT people, then yes, you may not care that as a bi person I could be turned away from a restaurant or a hotel or whatever. But keep in mind that a lot of bigotry goes together. Someone who dislikes all LGBT people is most likely also going to have a problem with Jews or Catholics or black people or Mexicans or whatever. Someone who doesn't like brown people is most likely also going to have a problem with black people, Asian people, LGBT people. So right now is the time where we need to not look at our differences. Instead, we need to look at our shared responsibility as American citizens. We need to decide that what is most important is carrying the beautiful vision of the experiment of what we call America. We need to remember that America is something that is held within each of us, and we each have a responsibility to defend it. We each have a responsibility to defend it by speaking up for those who cannot speak, for remembering the ethics and the morality that shape us as a nation as something that is not shared by one spiritual text alone. It is something shared by common beliefs that help us understand that the other is our brother, that help me look across the table at someone that I disagree with on so many things. You may be a fire-breathing, Bible-beating Republican who thinks Trump is absolutely the most wonderful thing in the world. As an American, your basic human rights to say that, believe that, and defend that belief is something that must be important to me. I may not agree with somebody who is an absolute Bernie Sanders, thinks all wealthy people should go to hell. And yet, as an American, your ability to believe that must be something I'm willing to defend. And you may not be someone that likes a bisexual environmentalist who thought that both Bernie and Trump were crazy. But as Americans, it is your responsibility to defend me too. We have an opportunity to defend our nations and to help it be what it can be help it be at its best. But that will only happen if we speak out for each other. If we say we are not going to allow our country to divide us on race, on economics. We are not going to allow our country to divide us on religion. That we are going to respect our neighbors' choices for their religion, for their sexual orientation, their race of who they want to date. We are going to be the ones who make that decision. Do we fall backwards in time? Do we move forward into a brave, beautiful new world that we can all be a part of? Do we move forward understanding how boring it would be to have Tex-Mex every night, Chinese every night, matzo balls every night? And how much more interesting it is to get to have different flavors. Ethiopian tonight, Incan food tomorrow night, chicken fried steak the night after. We are varied, and that variation gives us innovation and beauty. That innovation gives us what has always been the American spirit to be able to intuitively bring the world together because we experimented with it here first. We are the culmination of an understanding of democracy that goes from ancient Greece to Spain to the UK to the Iroquois nation. We are made up of people that came from, whose ancestors had ancient Rome to the Aztec Empire. We are people that have blended from all walks of life and all sorts of places to forge together one destiny. They could only come into its fullest, most beautiful form when we work to coexist with each other. And that does not require agreement. That does not require all of us being the same thing. That does not require being homogenous. It does require mutual respect. At the deepest spiritual level, it does require recognizing the other as a soul as worthy and as full as potential as we are. And I'll demonstrate that by saying right now, from a spiritual perspective, I believe that Donald Trump has been put into a position in his life where he's being forced to do something he has never been forced to do before. And that is think of people outside of himself. I hope for our president the opportunity to evolve spiritually into something that he never would have thought he would become. Someone worthy of sitting in that chair. Not because of his money, but because just maybe the chair will help make him a better man. Now, I will pray for him, and I will pray for those children who are paying for the sins of our country, because many of their countries have become hell because of actions our country did in our past, and their lives are now hell when they sought amnesty and help because of things we are doing, the sins of our country currently now. A lot of people like to get on the LGBT wagon by saying, Sodom and Gomorrah, you're a sodomite. Very few understand that the real intention of that story was the story of all of these angels that would come in and were knocking on doors, pretending to be beggars. Please, some food, please, some water, I'm in such need. And the doors of mansions were slammed in their faces. And finally, two of these angels went to a small hut that looked dilapidated and run down. And they saw these people were in rags. And these people only had, I think, a little cheese, a little milk, and some bread. Barely enough to survive. And they said, do you have anything? We're starving. And this couple, out of the goodness of their hearts, gave them what they had. And therefore, when God decided to smite down on Sodom, the angels revealed themselves and told them, leave the city. The rest are sodomites. A true sodomite is not someone who has had sex with the same gender. A true sodomite is someone who does not show hospitality to his brother. Right now, our nation is at risk of being the sodomites. So if you want something biblical to go by, there you go. But as an American who believes in all spiritual practices being equal, I want to close with just this, a prayer. Dear Spirit, thank you for for giving us this opportunity to be here in this place and time. We recognize that it is when we are put in this place and time, and there are choices to be made that are difficult, it is because you have called us to act. We ask you to lead us and guide us so that we may be all that we are meant to be in the here and now. So we serve with our lives what needs to be done. We ask you to use empathy and compassion to inform our decisions. We ask you to help us never get so mired in our resentment of the other that we no longer see our common humanity. We ask you to give us the humility to recognize we have much to learn from our neighbors, even if they are very different from ourselves. We ask you to guide us. We ask you to walk with us. We ask you to help us as a nation to evolve past this, to become worthy of the vision that our founding fathers had. We ask you to help us heal from past wrongs. Help us heal from the slavery of our past by refusing to allow this new potential for slavery today. We ask you to help us heal from the internment camps of the Japanese by refusing to allow the continuation of the internment camps that have been built today. We ask you to help us heal from the misogynies and the sexism of our past by helping us to stand up to it today. We ask you to help us heal from taking advantage of the weak in other countries by remembering that how we do business today, we can change that. We ask you to help every person, wherever they are, to recognize that we are each individually powerful enough to be part of the solution, just by rising to it consciously and making our decisions intelligently and informed. We ask you to walk with us everywhere we go. Make us instruments of your peace, to help us look at hatred in the face and not hate back. Help us not become that which we hate. Help us to instead become something worthy of your love. We know that you love and forgive, but we ask you to help us forgive each other and to help us learn to love each other and to help us see in each other some of the beauty that you see in us. We ask you to help us see you in each other. Amatuldo. I love you all. I know this has been a long one, but I didn't know any other way to share it.